Hello and welcome to PRPOI's April live session. As India's largest platform dedicated to the upskilling of the entire PR community, we deep dive into real issues, questions, and challenges that the PR industry faces and bring you real conversations, share relevant insights, and workable solutions. I am Tarunjeet Rattan, founder of PRPOI, and today we talk about a subject that's been on everybody's mind for a while now, the journalism PR flip. Journalists turning to PR was once rare, but now it's becoming increasingly common. But then professions evolve all the time. So, why does this particular shift stir such strong emotions? Often dubbed the dark side, the move evokes curiosity, judgment, sometimes even resentment from both sides of PR and journalism. Is it because journalists leave for better opportunities? Or is it the unforgivable act of crossing over that unsettles a newsroom? Or is it because the top positions are swooped up by journalists by cutting the line that a lot of PR pros are gunning for? And once they switch, does the reality match the perception? With both sides locked in a tug of war, who owns storytelling and the position? The debate is real and necessary. Today, we bring together three incredible professionals who've looked at addressing this from every side, who've made this leap, guided others through it from both sides of the world and from different vantage points within the ecosystem. They'll share what the transition really looks like beyond the assumptions, beyond the headlines, and help us better understand how we as a community can foster more empathy, collaboration, professionalism between journalism and PR as the boundaries continue to blur between the two. Before I add them on, I will take a moment to give a shout out to my co-curator and co-founder Pooja Trehan for continuing to bring some fantastic and relevant conversations alive in the world of PR and comms. Let's add our first panelist, Jasmin Hyde. Hi, Jasmin. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Tarunjeet. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Jasmin is the founder of Hyde Seek Communications, an agency based in Australia that partners with brands shaping a better future. But Jasmin doesn't just lead campaigns, she's shaping careers. Through her flagship program From Press to PR, she helps journalists pivot into public relations with confidence. Our next panelist is Rozelle Laha. Let me add her on. Okay. I think Rozelle is still joining in. So I'm going to introduce Amy first. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us. Amy is a science communicator, former journalist, and all-around communication powerhouse. Amy has helped translate complex science for the masses, representing organizations like ALMA, the Event Horizon Telescope, and the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. She's also helped bring clarity to healthcare comms with names like Pfizer, Millipore Sigma, Children's Miracle Network. From black holes to breakthrough therapies, she's been the bridge between experts and everyone else. And she started it all as a journalist, penning stories for an online astronomy magazine called Earth Sky. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. I know it's very late in the night there, but really appreciate you being here with us. Amy, you're on mute.
Oh, great. Off to a bang up start. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to bring this perspective from the United States to the conversation.
Fantastic. So before we get started, I'm going to add a third guest in. Rozelle Laha joins us from India. Thank you, Rozelle, for joining us. She's a sharp strategic communication advisor who's worn multiple hats and not an unfamiliar name in the PR and comms circle. She's a journalist, PR pro, corporate comms lead based in India. She has worked across newsrooms, agencies, boardrooms, bringing her expertise to listed companies, policy-driven brands, and high-voltage sectors like gaming and crypto. Thank you, Rozelle. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tarunjeet. Great to be here.
So let's get started. I'm excited to have this conversation today. To start with, Jasmin, could you briefly walk us through your personal journey? What sparked this transition from PR to training? And what did it feel like emotionally and professionally?
Yeah, sure. So still very much in PR running Hyde Seek, but we recently expanded to offering coaching. So didn't really plan to become a trainer, but it happened because really externos kept reaching out, mostly on LinkedIn. They were feeling burnt out, underpaid, limited career pathways. There are a number of reasons. So the problem was there, the appetite for the conversation was there. So the goal with Press to PR, which is the coaching course, is not just to help journos get a job in PR, but to really help them belong to PR and then thrive in it, which is what it's all about. So what did it feel like emotionally? Good question. I think the shift felt like purpose. And professionally, it felt like expanding capacity. So instead of designing comms campaigns or strategies, empowering, I guess, the next wave of PR talent to do that with confidence and gravitas. But I think it should be noted that the shift we're seeing, as you mentioned, Tarunjeet, is not new. So I've worked with amazingly talented journos over my time agency side. So the shift isn't new, but the scale and rate that it's happening really is. Like last year in Australia alone, almost 4,000 journos were made redundant, and that's just one market. So yeah, it's not really just a pivot moment, but it's a whole structural shift. So people are just seeing that they need a bit of guidance to help navigate that.
Interesting. In this entire state of chaos, entire movement and transition that is happening from both ends, it'll be interesting to see how the industry shapes up, the comms industry shapes up. But you found a very interesting niche for yourself. That brings me to Rozelle. Rozelle, if you could help us understand, how and why did you decide to make this switch? If you could help us understand how and why you decided to make this switch, and what is the most surprising misconception you encountered about journalism and PR? Rozelle, you're on mute.
Hi, sorry. Let me restart. Yeah. So I decided to move to the comms side after spending about 7.5 years in journalism. I always knew that I want to work in business because it's to actually shape strategies and learn a lot from some of these founders as to how to run a business. Something that I always wanted to do, right? So it was a natural decision. Coming to your and I think when the GST rollout happened in 2017 in India, it was a new tax system that kind of made jobs in the journalism space look very shaky. So that I thought was the right time. I think that felt like the right time. The biggest misconception, I think, is that having media relations means you can control the media. That's something. Side, I felt that there is this whole positioning gap that most people think that PR people are just middlemen. They are just kind of taking the information from media to the journalists, so from the media to the corporate and vice versa. I don't think both of these are correct. So I think these two misconceptions, I feel, exist.
Okay, Amy, coming to you, you moved into a very interesting segment of PR and communication. What prompted this move for you? And was there a moment where you felt you had to defend this decision?
Well, I think you mean more specifically corporate communications and science communication. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Moving into that area. Well, for me, I think my career was a little more fluid. It happened to me rather than I happened to it. And that happens, I think, to a lot of journalists and PR professionals. And to be clear, I started my first journalism job over 20 years ago. So I was going through this in a very different time than many of our journalists are going through it now. And so for me, what it was just sort of finding, where do I make the most sense? I have a very literal mind and a very literal way of being. And so journalism really fit for me. But when I started to feel like I wasn't belonging there anymore, and part of that was because I wasn't making ends meet. I think every journalist around the world can feel that. And I had to start looking for something else. I had graphic design work. I had media buying work. And my resume just this sort of interesting jump around for a very long time before I settled into this place where I was like, oh, I'm good at science. I understand this. And I was able to start communicating about science across the very broad spectrum and health sciences and space science to really land in that. So it didn't feel disjointed and I didn't feel surprised. I just sort of woke up one day and there I was.
Wow. It's always nice when the transition happens gradually, feels very natural. But when it doesn't, Jasmine, this question's for you, right? You have students, mentees from all over the world making the shift from PR to journalism, from journalism to PR. Do you feel the switch is still stigmatized in today's media and PR ecosystem? Why or why not?
Sadly, yes. I personally think the dark side notion needs to die, and I think it will fade out with the convergence we're seeing, not across just journalism and PR, but digital and advertising, so paid platforms as well. There'll be less sides, I think, as the lines become more blurred. When it comes to journos making the switch, a lot of the feedback we hear is the "you sold out" whisper is still very much around. So there's that perception of, oh, you're leaving journalism for a kind of easier form of storytelling. And it's just a lot of kind of outdated stereotypes, I think, where that's coming from. But the good news is that people are starting to see PR for what it really can be, which is storytelling around impact, not spin or fluff. So the moment that media realizes that when they make the switch, they're still telling stories, but with more like strategy and intent, the stigma starts to fade. So yeah, it's fading fast. And I think as the lines become more blurred, it's going to be a good thing for both industry and audiences. So it's a journey, but we're getting there.
Interesting. Rozelle and Amy, do you see the same thing happening in your countries?
Amy first.
Sure. Well, I was going to let you go first. We were going in order, but I will. So in the United States, I don't think we've quite nailed down what we think, just industry-wide, but there's still a little bit of that feeling, like Jasmine is saying, of a sellout, that you're going to this other dark side. We actually don't call it the dark side in the United States. At least I've not heard that term, but there is that thought that it's the easier pathway, when really, if you have done both, you have been in journalism and you have been in PR, you say these are equally as difficult for different reasons, because we have the same goal, but we get there by extraordinarily different means, and we have very different intentions in getting to that goal, and we have different methods to get there. And so it can be very difficult to make that switch, and also to understand, if you've only ever been in one or the other, how equally challenging they each could be, and how important they are to the ecosystem.
I wish more people understood that, but we'll park this discussion for a later time. Rozelle, have you seen the same thing happen in India as well?
I think I agree with both Jasmine and Amy, but slight difference. I think in India, I think slowly people understand these are two different paths, and both are equally challenging. It's not going to a lesser complicated role. In fact, I hear a lot of people, say that, oh, my job is pretty easy because I get to just ask a bunch of questions sitting outside the company and write about it. And you are just focusing on the story, not the impact or the outcome. So being answerable to a CEO or a founder is kind of more, kind of something that's not easy. It's tougher. I think that understanding is there. And even today, I don't think even in India, like Amy said, we call it the dark side. It's kind of, something that only us PR people sometimes say that, I'm in the dark side of PR. But I don't think anybody thinks it's a dark side, even in India.
Okay, so you're going to have to meet more journalists to talk about it. So, having said that, Rozelle, Amy, this question is for both of you. At any point of time, did you feel that, okay, I need to switch back to journalism? Or at what point did you stop wishing you want to go back to journalism? Because we've often seen that, PR is not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted, as we call it. And after a couple of years, you do see journalists switching back to journalism instead of wanting to continue in PR, right? So at some point, you must have thought, okay, this is it. This is the profession for me. Amy?
Yeah, it's like I can take that. You can see the little smile brewing, which is them. So I still live in both worlds. I have a foot in both. Science communication is small enough, and we are looking for more people. Like, I don't think I can say that strongly enough to everyone listening tonight or that's going to listen to the recording. There is a home for you. And I want to be very clear, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a second to just say, at a PR firm or at an ad agency, not everyone is pitching the media. Not everyone is managing strategy. They hire strong writers. There is a room, there is space for journalists to continue to be a journalist, and also if they want work as a writer in an ad agency, still developing those stories in a very journalistic fashion. There is definitely room for that, especially in science communication, because it's very similar. It's that outcome, that story that comes out of it is still very similar in the end. But I have lost my train of thought now, so Rozelle should jump in and rescue me from myself. But I think that was just a really important point I wanted to make, and then I lost what I really wanted to say here.
So we'll come back to that. Rozelle, at what point did you stop saying that?
I haven't. Like, I never missed journalism being in PR. Like AB said, I specialize in crisis communications and strategic communications. PR is just one part of it. And I feel that I'm always thinking like a journalist. Like, in fact, all of my jobs, I have always said that I'm an in-house journalist. I am thinking before the journalist thinks about this story, before the journalist goes to my competition, trying to do, a spin-off story from something that happened. So I think being a journalist has been such an advantage, because you are actually thinking like them already, because you have worked with the editors. You know what is going to make news and what is going to be like clickbaity sometimes as well. So I think, and I have worked across some 7-8 different beats in journalism. And that has helped me think very multidisciplinary, that in terms of multi-beat approach. So I don't miss journalism even one day. Yes, I do miss waking up in the morning and seeing my byline on a paper. But then again, now we have social media, and I can still kind of call each post a byline and live with it. I'm fine with that. But the principles of journalism are very much used in communications on a day-to-day basis, so much so that you can take out the person from the journalism, but not the journalism from the person. I feel that it's kind of inseparable.
Thank you.
Rozelle,
Thank you so much for that. Oh, go ahead.
Rozelle, I love the way that you kind of communicated that and put that into a perspective. I hope a lot of people from India who are watching this would be able to understand journalists as well as PR, how they both need to be in synergy together. And I'd love for you to talk to more journalists and more PR professionals to help them understand this transition is normal, it's natural, rather than one having the upper hand on the other. Yeah. Amy, would you want to complete your thought before we jump into the next question?
Yes, thank you so much. And it took that. Rozelle, thank you so much for that, because it brought me back to that thought, which was that it is so very much the same. And what I have loved about my shift was that while I learned how to be a journalist and to dig deeply and to think very deeply about a topic, when I first made that switch into PR and corporate communications, then I started to learn, because I was very young and still immature right when I made this shift. I was only 21. And so I hadn't really learned that the human part of the story could be a lot of the fact. And so now in PR, I get to draw that out of someone. I get to take those facts from a scientist and let them be really excited. And I hope we'll get to talk about that more, because I have this really beautiful example of how that can happen. And I get to help that person shine through the media. And so as a journalist, I only got to do that once with the publication I was working at. But in PR, I get to help them do that across a wide spectrum of media. And so that is very beautiful in a lot of ways to me. So while I still love journalism, I really love that component of PR and what I get to do with people.
That's fantastic. That's a very mature way of looking at, the role of a communicator. who's switching in from journalism. However, journalists turning to PR, even though it was rare once, it typically usually happened at the upper levels, But today, as Jasmine mentioned when we were talking about it earlier, that it's happening in droves because of economic conditions. But then both professions evolve all the time. So why does this particular shift stir such strong emotions in both PR and journalism communities? How would you all like to weigh in on this? Jasmine, we'd start with you. Since you've been meeting a lot of mentees and students from all across the world, why does this, shift evoke so much of strong emotion?
Yeah, we won't rattle on too much about the stigma because we keep going back to that, but it is a part of it. The kind of perception from the outside of what PR is. So when you believe PR is what all the stereotypes say it is, or a really outdated view of, schmoozing with celebrities and politicians, or long lunches and, being best friends with a journalist to get a story out there that shouldn't be out there. If you think PR is all that, of course, there's going to be this tension around the convergence. I think another part of it is maybe a lesser talked about angle, which is the power dynamics. So when you're a PR, journos traditionally have the upper hand. So it's like, we've got the power of running the story or not. I think this is changing as Rozelle touched on with social media and the power of being able to put thought leadership and kind of commentary out on their own channels. It's definitely changing, but that power shift dynamic, losing that, I guess, or that changing and kind of going to the other side of pitching to journos when you used to be calling the shots on what makes the newsroom cut or not. I think that's a little bit of a part of it. So I think it's just about sort of shifting the mindset and understanding, to Amy's point, it's not about objective reporting. You actually have the opportunity to be a part of like really exciting advocacy work, especially in the world of like purpose-driven PR. So it's just about sort of shifting the mindset and understanding that a lot of the time it's a common goal and it's about great stories and raising awareness for things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Rozelle, I'm going to switch the question a little bit for you. How did the media culture in India influence your understanding of PR world before you made the switch? And is that the reason why such strong emotions keep popping up every time somebody says that this corporate communication position was given to a journalist?
I really don't think that, I have had a different experience. Maybe I was very lucky that way. But I feel that, smart PR people were always valued at newsrooms. And the one thing that probably shaped how I see, how I solve problems working with the founders is that I already knew that newsrooms run on a very panic, chaos, and forget and again repeat kind of a model, right? So it made my life easy to stay calm and tell my founders that this phase too shall pass. So I don't panic every time there's a new cycle. I understood the news cycle well. And I think that has been valued. And I think a lot of smart PR professionals can also do that. It's not a journalist got a position and, a PR person did not. I don't think this was like 2015, 2016 kind of a thing. Today, I think we all understand that it's the story that matters. Doesn't matter who it is coming from. As long as you are a storyteller, that's the first principle. Right? So if you are a great storyteller and you have a PR background, great. If you are a great storyteller and from journalism, great. But if you're not a great storyteller, it doesn't matter who you are. And in public relations, I have seen people from all kinds of backgrounds. I have seen engineers doing it for that matter, not just things. So it's about a great story at the end of the day. Doesn't matter who is saying it. I think that conversation has been parked, at least in my experience of working with and networking with the founders and the investors on the one side, and my journalist friends, of course, because they're the ones I'm kind of always spending my weekends with. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Amy, from your perspective, are there any structural or systemic gaps in India and US markets that make this transition harder than it should be?
Yes, but it's not necessarily a structural gap. It's more that the number one problem that we see really between journalism and PR is really our communication to each other. And that, because that relationship is already formulated and we are lacking that communication. We have thousands of journalists who have their specific ways of wanting to be communicated, and they don't necessarily understand the panic level that a PR can be going through trying to get the news out about their client, and if they make a mistake or they cast a wide net, and that it's not disrespectful. It's just that we all have different ways of communicating, and again, those different needs and methods. And that's part of what makes that transition difficult, is remembering and understanding that those methods are different. And so whether you're a PR going to journalism or journalism coming to PR, there's an understanding that journalism, this is the fundamental, if you want to talk about a gap, the fundamental gap is journalism at its core is about the people's right to know.
Right.
That is what it is. PR is about balancing the people's right to know with the best interests of the client. And so there is that additional complicating factor where you have to consider that and learn to guide that. So we're talking about how PR sometimes gets a bad rap, and it's why it's more complicated is because we have to learn to guide the clients to make the best decisions possible, so that they have their best interests at heart, but also maintain the people's right to know and the people's best interest. And that's why it can get a little complicated. And that's where that breakdown occurs when that shift is happening, is understanding you don't have to give up your integrity. You just have to learn how to communicate it to the client to help them make good decisions, because one news story is today. But when you're in PR, you have to think about how that one news story is impacting them 6 months and a year and 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And so that's the fundamental gap that can make it a really bumpy transition if you're not prepared to take on that additional challenge.
Yeah. Just on that
Absolutely.
bad rap about, oh, sorry, Tarunjeet.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Oh, just on that bad rap about PR, I think we shouldn't also deny that there is a bit of bad PR practice out there. And some of the bugbears that journos have, it didn't come from nowhere. So I actually see that as, I see this convergence of journalists moving into PR as a way to bridge that gap. And hopefully, you see the kind of know-how of the newsrooms rubbing off on PR practitioners everywhere. So yeah, it's a good thing. But I don't think we can deny that there's sort of bad PR practice out there, which is maybe answering your question, Tarunjeet, about where's the tension coming from. I think it's a factor. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love this. These are quotes that I can probably put on a poster and put in every newsroom or every PR agency out there, right? We received a very interesting question yesterday when we were promoting this entire session. This question is directed towards Rozelle and Amy, but Jasmin, please feel free to jump in on this. Question being, have you dealt with angst from a PR team member who was promised the job, but then it was awarded to a journalist with no prior experience? Does this imply that brands are only looking at media relations as a primary function of PR, or does this indicate a deeper underlying challenge for the PR industry on how we see influence, storytelling, and credibility for their own profession? Rozelle, would you like to go in first?
Okay, sure. So let me get the question right. So you were saying that somebody got a job just by being a journalist, and they got the priority access to the role, is what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
See, I think.
Sorry, it tends to, whether we like it or not, it does tend to happen in the Indian industry quite a lot, and I think world over as well, where if there are two applicants for a particular job, a brand manager or a founder would tend to pick up a journalist more often than a PR professional. It is the hard truth. So the question then being, does this mean that brands look at media relations as just the core of PR? Or is this a problem with the perception of PR that probably the PR industry has got to work on themselves?
I don't think this is a very generic situation, because it's very brand specific. If the brand has to be media focused, it's a very different thing. And if it is if it has got to do with a lot of policy communications, a lot of strategic communications, where it involves working with various stakeholders on the agency side, be it a ORM or a policy communications, a policy specific agency, or ghostwriters. I think it's very different. So it is very it's a very difficult question to answer without knowing which brand we are referring to. But I can personally tell you, I have interviewed so many times in my career, and having the PR experience in most global companies is so important. Especially, I come from gaming and crypto. Having a good understanding of how an agency works, coupled with journalism, was something that the recruiters came to me and said, because that makes the combination good. Just having journalism or just having just PR experience did not work very well. And if they had to choose between the two, they would probably go with a PR agency first, because they have at least worked with two different stakeholders. Journalists have not worked with even one. I mean, journalists have worked with only one, not even one, only one, which is, talking to their audience for a company, looking at the story. Whereas a PR person has worked between the client and the journalist, balancing the two. So in my experience, I have seen PR people, for senior roles at least, given a little more edge because they understand the nuance of communicating corporate to the world. So I think that's just my experience, but I'm sure the person who wrote this must have seen it for a particular brand which had media as a very key mandate, and media relations may have been super important. Amy,
Absolutely.
from you.
So in the United States in particular, and I do want to acknowledge that, we have a lot of different cultures and countries listening in tonight, and the United States is not the only country that I have worked in. But the hiring practice is convoluted all on its own, no matter what industry you are in, and no matter what you are talking about. But a lot of times we, as the candidate who didn't get the role, we only really see things from the outside. And so we don't know what all of the other factors are into hiring a specific individual. And so again, in this instance, I talk to groups all the time about the hiring process in all different types of industries, and what was that person's portfolio that got the role? What was it that the organization was really looking for? A job ad is only one part of what they are looking for. Was it something about their personality? Did they have 5 really great pieces in the same industry as the brand or as the organization? Did their interview just go really, really well for them? And everyone else had a really bad day. I have myself been interviewed for a role I knew I was perfect for, but I had a really bad day in my interview and I didn't get the role, and it went to someone who didn't have as much experience as me, in my opinion. But then again, what is the experience they are looking for? I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does. There are instances where it's unclear and unfair in the way that job hiring happens. But I wouldn't say that it's a standard that is happening across the board. And we all have to just continue trying, and it's going to get better. The more vocal we all are about what needs to be done better in the hiring process, and how managers need to be better, and hiring managers and recruiting departments, the more that is also going to change. And that's just a whole other part of the ecosystem, and that isn't directly PR and journalism, but is affecting everyone in both of these spaces. So just whoever asked this question, keep talking about it, and talk about it loudly, so that your voice is really heard, and you can in that way start to affect change.
Absolutely. Jasmin, do you hear this as a common refrain amongst the mentees that you have? You've been training from across the world?
It's an interesting question. I would say, and I know this is apparent in the Australian market, I've also heard challenges around what I'm about to say in the US market from across borders, but it's actually the opposite that we see. So personally, every agency I've worked in has had at least one externo, in most cases several, and I've seen the benefits of that. But I know there are hiring managers out there, recruiters out there who need previous agency experience to hire a PR person. So that's what a lot of journos are seeing the challenge with. They've got these amazing newsroom skills and storytelling instincts, but they can't land a job because they haven't got that previous agency experience. So it's really about reframing the skills and really speaking up those abilities, because it's changing fast with this shift. But I've actually seen the opposite issues. So I think being hired because of being an externo, because they've got the know-how rather than the CV tick, I actually see that as quite a positive. But then again, I don't know the nuances of that situation, so it might have been unfair, who knows. But yeah, I think Tarunjeet's lost her connection. But yeah, it's interesting to hear everyone's view on that.
But I agree with you, Jasmin. It's so true. Like, I have personally been rejected because I didn't have a PR experience when I was looking for a job in the space. Sorry, we were just continuing the conversation because we realized that you lost connection. So we were just saying that, I have seen the same thing. Yeah.
So you've seen it firsthand.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
When all of you are talking about this brings a question to mind. At what point would you recommend that journalists make the switch to PR, since it involves a lot of managing of expectations in a brand team after an internship, junior level, senior correspondent, editor? What would be the right time for a journalist to make a segue into PR?
That's a good question. It's a
very tough question.
Very case by case as well. I think a lot of it comes from, and this is part of, I think, the importance of these sorts of conversations, because instead of it being a last resort or this horrible decision that someone has to make or something, it's quite the opposite. It's like very exciting new chapter rather than closing the book. It's like still, sitting at the same table, but speaking to more audiences across more channels. So I think it is this exciting pivot. You need to, I think, be ready and be passionate for the shift, or you might not thrive in the sort of, whether you go agency or in-house. I think you need to be emotionally and mentally ready for the shift. But in terms of if it's you've just graduated from journalism and you've decided maybe PR's for you, that's fine. Are you a year in? Are you 10 years in? I think it's a very personal situation, but that's good news for people at all different stages of their career. Yeah.
Absolutely. But do you not think that at some point, because you have been in journalism, let's say for 2 decades, right, that there is a certain mindset that seeps in and it becomes difficult for you to pivot? Keeping that in mind, what is the right time for somebody to segue into this? Rozelle, would you like to address it?
Okay, that's a tough one. There are 3 times I feel in your career that you can do. One, when you have just done, like Jasmin was mentioning, like you just completed your mass comm course and you have to decide between the 3. So just pick one and run with it, and you start somewhere and you figure out the nuances. The other time is if you have spent at least 2 years and you feel that you are not enjoying the drill of journalism. Figure out what you really want to do. Talk to a lot of PR people and see if what PR people do in a day-to-day basis, if that really is something that excites you. So have a lot of conversations. So that's another time. And the first one is just starting out somewhere. The second one is if you're not liking something, figure out if what is happening on a day-to-day life in a PR world excites you. The third time is not 20 years perhaps, but 7 to 10 years is when you have seen the industry, you understand what it is, you're in a fairly senior role, and you are jumping for very specific life reasons. Can be better package, job stability, kind of double clicking on storytelling as a skill, or media relations as a skill. In my case, I switched around 7.5 years later, and for me it was very clear. I want to work with the business, work from inside the business, shape a business with my skill set, which was storytelling and strategic communications. So you have already figured out what you want. So I think these 3 stages, you are very right. Like after 20 years, it is very difficult, because then you already have a very strong opinion about how a particular thing works. And I think it's same for a salesperson getting into a strategy role, perhaps, or a engineer getting into a sudden CTO role. I think it's the same challenge that every cross-functional shift at that level of 20 years of experience would face.
Absolutely. So, Amy, Rozelle has given us some, time brackets in which you could possibly make a shift. What is the max that you would cap it at? Saying that after 25 years, don't bother.
For me, maybe it's because the United States is going through this amazing renaissance where someone who is 90 years old can go back to school and get their bachelor's degree and have a whole new life. Or maybe it's because I have a master's degree in museum studies and I have also built my own science career in science research outside of journalism and PR, but I don't feel like there is a time that it is about when you feel like, as Rozelle said, it's time to make a shift. And I want to do something different with more meaning. And I think particularly in the United States, and I don't know how this is feeling everywhere else in the world right now, but here we are very much feeling like we are pulling back in and looking for purpose. So if that's now and you've been in the industry for 50 years, well, then it's now. But if you've been in, 2 years or 3 years or 5 days and it's now, then it's now. And I don't think we need to force ourselves into a square. If you are round, you don't have to fit into a square. If you are square, you don't have to fit into round. If you're someone like me and you're star-shaped, you're not going to fit in the round or the square. And so it's okay to make that move at any point, recognizing that you are going to face different levels of challenge into making that shift and whether you are willing to take on that challenge to make the shift. Someone who is a year in may not have the portfolio or the background to make the shift that Rozelle made. They may not have that experience or to be able to launch into that new career. And but someone who's been around 50 years might have a little too much experience in one area and might need to get the skills in another and be willing to start a little lower and build back up, just like you would in any industry.
Absolutely. So we have some
I
very
would just
interesting
add to that.
coming.
I'll just, if I may, just quick thing. I think if this is a question that came from one of our viewers, I think the way to look at it is start by asking why you are doing it. Once you get your why right, even if you have 20 years of experience, it doesn't matter because you are very clear as to why you are doing it. I have people with 20 years of experience in journalism as well, doing great strategic communications, and they bring in a very different perspective. Was it the right time for them? I don't know. Will it be the right time for somebody else to do it? I don't know. But this guy was very clear about why he is doing it, right? So I think getting your why right at any part of your career will go along with something that both Jasmin and Amy said, getting the purpose right. I think everything else is secondary.
I've seen journos with 2 decades under their belt come into PR and do really well. And what it can mean is that they go higher up sooner. So they're involved in more of that deeper strategy or leading a department rather than learning all the nuts and bolts, which, there's pros and cons attached to that. But I say it's never too late. Maybe I'm optimistic. But I've seen people thrive after decades of,
Yeah, I mean, and
Absolutely.
I love that. I love to see somebody make a renaissance and that you're helping them, Jasmin, do that. You're helping them now make that transition. And I think that that's really cool.
Absolutely. So I think you're going to enjoy the next set of questions that are coming in. Now that you are in PR and comms, this is directed at both Rozelle and Amy. I'm curious to know if you could send a push notification to every journo's phone after a pitch of a story has gone out, what would it say without you getting blocked? So, Amy, would you like to go first on it?
No. Well,
the next question is even
to be
fancier.
clear, I only said, I highly curate pitches to the media, so it would be a very small number of people, and but I don't think I would send a push notification. The thing is, I'm growing and having to have a renaissance in PR myself, as a PR professional, in that I've been around long enough that I like to pick up the phone to call someone and follow up on a pitch. And so the idea of a push notification, I'm like, how would you even do that? We need someone 15 years younger than me to come in and even tell me how we would do that. And that's sort of the beautiful thing about journalism and PR, is that there's always room for younger people or people who have different skill sets. Hey, if you're out there and you're in, tech PR or tech journalism right now, you might know how to do that. Come in and show us. That's your segue into PR, is that you know how to do that. I wouldn't send a push notification. And I feel like I need to give them time to look at it and remember that they are a human being on the other end of my pitch. And so it's incumbent on me to give them the space to breathe and read the pitch that I have sent, and I will follow up with them on the formula that has always worked for me in PR, which is I give them 2 days to think about it. And I don't pitch after Wednesday unless I absolutely have to. There's really emergent news. If it's a little more evergreen, I would not pitch on a Thursday or Friday. So I'm pitching Monday and I'm following up on Wednesday and I'm following up on Friday on something I had already sent earlier in the week. So push notification would feel rough to me. It would feel invasive almost.
So these are the golden rules of PR that you actually kind of, put out there. However, I have seen a lot of my younger colleagues send out pitches or start having conversations on Instagram DMs or on Twitter chats, and they manage to convert stories. To me, that's sacrilege, but well, that's how the new set of journalists are also looking at working.
No, that's okay. I mean, I've landed stories on Twitter myself. Twitter is old enough. Some of the younger people who are listening are like, what is that? X.com. No, I mean, I've done pitching via social media. I'm not saying, that isn't it. I even myself wouldn't think that is sacrilege. It's just a new way of pitching. But to send a pitch and then immediately follow it up with a push notification would feel invasive to me, because I haven't given them the opportunity to digest what I said. And
Understood.
I'm always remembering it's not just a business transaction. It has to work for everybody. And that's really what keeps our relationships strong, so that we can go back to that same person again and again, is that we are remembering who's on the other end. And that's my golden rule, is keep in mind there's a person on the other end. And
Absolutely. So you're going to love the next question. So based on that, I think you're going to love the next question. But I feel that, Rozelle, you should answer this first. What's your go-to move when a client says, all this is nice, but just get me in TechCrunch?
If it is a TechCrunch story, then let's go for it. I mean, it's all about, if it is a TechCrunch story, and we have got a lot of TechCrunch, and I have stopped more TechCrunch stories than get people into TechCrunch, I guess. But I think if there is a story, then let's go for it. If there is no story, then you have to explain it to them. There is no other way. And there is a way to get to TechCrunch. There are a lot of other publications you go first, signal that TechCrunch is the place to be before you do that. So sometimes it's a direct TechCrunch story, it's a straight TechCrunch. Sometimes it's a step. You go to 2-3 other publications that influence how TechCrunch writes your story. So I think these are the two ways to do it. But I want to go back to the previous question as well, what Amy was answering on, sending a push notification. Quick thing, I'll just take 30 seconds to say this, perhaps, that, if it is a pitch, it is not a mass story. It's not a press release. It's a pitch, which is one person. So my way to do it is I would usually pick up a lead. It's very much how you do sales. You pick up a lead, you sell the call, that let's have a call. I have a story for you. You do the call. After you send the pitch, you tell them that, hey, check your mail. I have sent it to you now. It's never a push notification, because pitch is not a mass, distribution. So the follow-up should not be a mass distribution. It has to be personalized. Sorry, I took 30
Understood.
seconds. I think.
That's okay. I think that was a great answer. Jasmine, the next question is for you. Journalists take a lot of time to acclimate to the world of PR, yet there is always an attitude of, I know better than you, especially in India. We've seen that happen very frequently. Don't you think these new recruits in the world of PR would benefit with a collaborative attitude with professionals who have been at it for a while rather than be defensive about domain?
Yeah. It goes both ways. So I've seen the other side as well, where journos aren't welcomed into agencies with enough respect, but certainly I've seen what this comment's relating to. It absolutely needs to be collaborative. I think there needs to be a mindset shift on both sides. So it's respecting and appreciating the knowledge and the newsroom background that the journo is bringing into the agency or the in-house role, and then the journos appreciating, and I think it goes back to that notion that PR is just easier journalism. Once they get over that and realize there's an art to it and there's a whole other rhythm to an agency or pitching, I think breaking down that barrier of, I know everything about journalism, hence I know everything about PR. I think that's where the collaboration really comes in, and really great results can come through when it's respect and appreciation from both sides of, this is new, I'm learning, I'm open to changing my ways. It's a big part of it. It's actually one of the key challenges and mindset shifts that we see. Yeah, it's a great question.
Absolutely. Rozelle, would you like to add to that, since India is specifically pointed out?
What's the question again? Sorry. Can you just summarize the question?
Sure. Don't you think that, a collaborative approach rather than defending each one's domain would work better for the entire industry? Because I don't think the switch is going to be, it's not a momentarily phase. This is going to happen more and more. So what's your take on that?
I think journalists should enter the PR agencies or the Corpcom side of it with a very, day zero kind of an approach. And I think PR people need to also say that, okay, now this guy is on my side and I need to work with this guy on a daily basis. So might as well drop my past, experiences with journalists, and there's a reason this guy is here. So let's kind of make it work. So you both kind of drop your egos and your past, knowledge about journalism and start on a par. So it has to be a two-way street. It's not that journalists should drop the ego and these guys should keep feeling that, okay, or it is not that these guys should feel that, okay, let's welcome this guy and, journalists show the ego. It's a two-way street.
So I'm hearing a lot of a common refrain which talks about having an open mindset, having a great attitude, and be open to learning, right? So I think those will be great qualities to have on both sides. However, we have two more very interesting questions that I like to take up. Globally, a lot of media is going behind a paywall, not so much in India, but globally it's happening a lot. Are journalists evolving to understand the value and partnership with PR because of this? Amy, would you want to take that?
That's a really interesting and difficult question to answer. So there are a number of, let me back up and just say that a number of the publications I'm sure are being referenced, particularly in the United States, were previously behind a paywall. And what changed, and so why we all think they are now behind a paywall, is because during the pandemic, a number of them took their paywalls down so that people who were stuck at home, and particularly in places like rural America where we're having these issues tonight, the internet is not great. You can't always get a hold of a copy of the newspaper, or you can't always get the news. You may not have TV service. all of these became open, and also so that they could share that breaking medical news and breaking global health news in a very open fashion to get that to people. And so these paywalls were already there, and now they are back. And so it's just that we sort of collectively forgot that the paywalls were there. I forgot. I opened a couple of, I'm not going to call them out, but I opened a couple of them over the past few weeks, and suddenly there the paywall was. I was like, oh yeah. Oh yes, this had a paywall at some juncture. I remember this. And so that collaboration and that just respect for each other still has to exist. And why that can be challenging for PR is if I got my client into a paywalled publication, I need a copy of it. And that's a part of the relationship, is getting a copy of that. And
Yeah.
and you ask for it. You can ask for that. And so that we have to go back to, I can't believe I have to say this, 5 years ago, PR, and to the way we were asking for things and working on those relationships to when those paywalls were already there.
Understood. Another interesting question: how do you communicate paid PR activities to your clients, especially when they think your rapport with the publication in question is decent?
Jasmin, take that one. Thank you.
When the report is decent?
So
So
as PR professionals,
yeah.
So as PR professionals, we don't have to, we kind of get away with it by saying that I don't work in a particular organization for me to be able to say that, okay, they will do this on a barter basis for me, or the story is not good enough. I'm free to say that, right? I have an unbiased view. But when you come from a particular publication, the fact that you have to present a paid PR activity, right? That becomes a little tricky. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it then falls into the advertising space rather than the PR space, I think, because it's less organic, obviously. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. That's the kind of mindset shift from consulting that can be useful, and managing clients, because it's all about, I want to be on the front page of this, and no, I don't want to pay for it. And it's about, how do you explain that? I think it comes back to what journalists are very good at, which is identifying what's a good story, what isn't. And then it's taking the client sometimes through an education process of, well, if it's not story worthy, it needs to be paid. Otherwise, if you give me this, this, and this, these elements for a good story, then it's, so it's rapport with the publication. I think there is this conception that, PRs who are best friends with journos can just land a story. I mean, it still needs to be a good story. You wouldn't pitch your friend a bad story, and it wouldn't get up if they're a good journo. So I think it's about the taking the client through the process of understanding what makes a good story, when it has to be a paid piece, and just taking them on that journey. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So
I would just add to it, Tarunjeet.
Sorry, last set of questions before we get into the rapid fire round. Rozelle, I'm going to tweak the question a little bit for you. Very interesting question that has come in. How do you handle situations where your media peers expect access or coverage simply based on past stories? They expect you to give them the big deal. Ditto for clients. Is media relations the only ask across PR that is valued between journalists, brands, and you?
Okay, so the question is basically from an agency side, client side, or like how the journalists see. Sorry, I
journalists,
kind of just.
So your peers, your older, peers, ex-peers, would expect you to give them the exclusive. If you had big news, they would expect that because of your relationship. We've heard a lot about clients expecting that, but I'm sure journalists also expect the same thing from you. How do you handle that?
It's a very tough one. There is no one answer to it, actually. So, yeah, I have had situations where I have given the story to someone else because that person would probably write it in a perspective that works for the kind of story I'm trying to communicate. But yeah, I mean, those are some bridges you have to perhaps burn. It's a very, very difficult one. I have worked in crypto, for instance, and I knew some publications, the larger ones, had 18 plus journalists covering crypto from different aspects of it, like from policy to particular coin to so on. It was very difficult. But I can say that, I think all remain journalists. You need to tell them why you gave it to a certain person. It's a tough one. There is no one answer to it, I guess.
Okay, Amy, I'm tweaking it a little bit for you. Ethical gray areas that you've had to navigate. Your top 3 ethical gray areas.
Top 3. Well, I think, it's important to know, of course, right? Of course, we have to, in public relations, navigate ethical gray areas. And anytime a person switches between journalism and PR, you're immediately hit with this realization that, again, and I brought this up earlier, that as a journalist, your job is focused on the public's right to know.
Right.
And that is always going to be that moment where you have to start asking yourself, what can I do for my client that is not pushing me into these areas, especially if I don't want to go to that place. And Jasmin brought this up earlier, and she said part of the reason sometimes PR gets a bad rap is because there is bad PR out there. And
Absolutely.
that is very true. There are people who will do bad PR, and they will get into that morally gray or ethically gray area and help spin a story that isn't true to hide something about a company. And so we have to, again, like I said, my compass is that I am guiding the client to do the right thing so that they have longevity of trust with the public and with journalists and with me, because I have to be able to talk about them and feel good about it every day. And while I don't want to share specific examples, I can tell you I did have a client who made a very, very big and very public mistake and error that had rippling effects for years. And we had to write a lot of op-eds and contributed articles, and we had to do a lot of interviews to explain the mistake and to make it right. And my client had to own that, and that was a very difficult time. And I had to watch that. It was very heart-wrenching sometimes to watch the experience that my client was having going through that. But it was the right thing to do, and ultimately it created this path forward for my client so that they were able to gain back public trust, journalism trust, and move on with their life and move on with their career and their business. And so it's about, that's going to be the big one. I don't think there's 3 big, ethical areas, ethically gray areas, because they all feed back into that.
That's the core of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that was a very difficult conversation to have, but I'm going to steer the conversation towards a lighter note. Let's get into the rapid fire round. Up with Rozelle first. Rozelle, one myth about PR you'd love to bust right now.
That PR can work without a larger comm strategy.
And what's the weirdest request you've ever received from a client? And how did you say, absolutely not?
So this client was, the founder that I was working with was in the middle of a major crisis. And this person had to tell the users that my platform can still be trusted. Don't go away, right? And this person wanted a story in Economic Times, the largest financial daily in India. And I said, but your users don't read that. If you want to talk to users, you need to talk to the publications where your users, get the answer to the questions they are looking for. So I think that was a big no, that, the best publication in the country need not be the publication that your users read. So, yeah.
Absolutely. If PR had a mascot, what would it be? Why do I think it's a duck?
Duck, of course. But I would say, given my journalism background, I would say a bird, because it knows what's not food. It is not chasing a shiny object. It is just kind of picking out things that's not food. So as PR people, we need to pick out what's not part of the strategy, part of the story that we are sending to the journalists. And I think that's why I would say bird. at large.
Great answer.
Not just done.
Amy, what's one journalism habit you had to unlearn in PR?
I didn't know this question was coming, and I don't think I've unlearned a lot of my habits. But I think I hold on to them quite dearly because I think they make me a better publicist. But it's that being so logical, right, that I couldn't focus on just being able to draw out all of the excitement. And in PR, that's something you really get to do if you open yourself to that wonder and awe. Is you get to tell this story from this very excited place. And so that would be a habit that I had before, that I even sometimes I think I have to check myself and say, you know, are you open, and are you being as excited as you could be?
Absolutely. That's an excitement we're all too familiar with. But have you ever had, wait, I can't say that anymore, moment in a pitch or a client meeting?
Oh, I think we do that. I mean, you know, all the time. All the time. That's what PR is looking at the way you are about to say something, or the way you have written something and saying, oh, I can't do that. I can't say that. I shouldn't say that. I need to say this instead. I can't give you specific examples, unfortunately, without outing clients, and I don't want to do that, or past workplaces, but I think we do that constantly. It's just all the time. And so you're constantly, it's fact checking yourself. And so in journalism, we had an editor and a fact checker to do that. But in PR, you are fact checking yourself and tone checking yourself. And so probably, actually, here's a really good example, you know, reminding clients, for example, of holy days, and being very thoughtful about a pitch that has to go out or a product launch. And we don't want to, you know, put out, this is not me, and I have never done this, but I did see this happen in another PR firm, where there was a pitch that came out about some party platter for a menorah, and it was very ill received because it came out on a very holy holiday in the Jewish faith. And so it's that kind of checking yourself in a room with your client and saying, this is maybe not the way to go, and let's think of another way. There may not have been a PR firm involved in that, but it got heavily discussed in a group that I'm in.
Thankfully, they did it before the era of memes. Else, that would have been another thing that they would have to deal with. But if you were to describe your journey in a headline, if your PR journey had a headline, what would it be?
I hitched my wagon to a star.
Oh, okay. I love that. All right, Jasmine, you're next. The one thing you wish every journalist understood about PR.
Firstly, Amy, I think you could update your LinkedIn bio with that, potentially. So good. The one thing I wish every journo understood about PR. So I guess that good PR isn't about fluff. It's not just shouting into the void, hoping someone cares. It's quite strategic when it's done right. So I know there's a bit of confusion about PR and strategic communications, but to Rozelle's point, PR shouldn't operate without that broader strategy. That's what makes good PR. Yeah. And that it's not just long lunches and press releases, at least not these days.
Absolutely. And what's the first journalism reflex most people need to unlearn when they step into PR? How do you train it out of them?
Yeah. So instead of chasing what's new or what's for today's headlines, being more strategic and thinking about what story is going to really move the needle. So we train this by slowing people down and getting them to think in audience journeys over like a campaign life cycle rather than just headlines. Newsrooms can operate quite day to day. So yeah. And if that doesn't work, then we get out the red pen. No tasers.
And if your training program had a warning label for ex-journals, what would it say?
Side effects might include rethinking your entire career and being excited to go to work on a Monday.
Fantastic. I love that. I am personally, I love Mondays.
Oh, good.
There, I said it. Yeah. Thank you so much to all three of you for being here today and taking the time out to speak to a PR community. There are more questions in the comments section. If at any point of time you'd love to take a look at it and respond to a few of them, would be wonderful. Thank you again for being a part of this panel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tarunjeet. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
So that was a fantastic panel, one that I feel that we could have gone on in terms of a conversation for at least another hour. But again, thank you to all three of our panelists for being so generous, candid, and thoughtful in this conversation. This was a much needed one. What we've heard today confirms what many of us already feel. Journalism and PR aren't opposing forces, two sides to the same storytelling coin. And an exchange of talent between the two should be a welcome move rather than that of resentment. It's clear that transitioning from journalism to PR isn't just about a job change. It's a shift in mindset, identity, perception. And if we can collectively move away from judgment towards collaboration, there's so much more we can achieve together, from better stories to stronger relationships and more mutual respect. To our audience, thank you for joining in. And I hope today's conversation leaves you with insights, empathy, and maybe even a new lens to view this dark side from. If you have more questions, please put them in the comments section, tagging the panelists, and they will answer them. By the way, all our episodes are now simulcasted on YouTube as well as LinkedIn, so you can watch it there too. So check that out. If you found this session insightful, do share it with your network. Keep the conversation going in the comments. We will see you next month with another equally intriguing conversation on PR. So until then, keep the conversation going. Let's continue to build a stronger, smarter, more inclusive PR and media ecosystem. Thank you again for tuning into PRPOI.